Right, good morning, folks. We will get going as usually on the turn of the hour. We're expecting a fair few to join us. Hopefully, they'll join the next couple of minutes whilst I ramble on through the introduction. A very warm welcome to everybody on the call and a happy New Year. Hope you all had a restful break. As you might expect, this year has a huge amount in store for sustainable building design going forward. And what I'm hoping to do today is to run through what I know at the moment, what I've spoken to other people about, and what they know, and just try and stir up some thoughts about what's to come. We'll try not to make this kind of too long for my bit. We've got, I don't know, maybe 25 slides or so, and it'd be great to open it up, get some chat going, get some questions asked, and see how we get on. I was actually looking back at the webinar that I did this time last year and trying to see how many of the predictions I got right that I made last year. And I would probably, maybe like 70–80% of the way there. Some things happened, some things didn't happen, but generally speaking, we were pretty close. Things can never happen kind of fast enough, and it was a bit disappointing last year what happened, and hopefully things will. I think there's a lot more momentum this year going ahead, so we'll get into that, and we'll look forward to that, and we can, as I say, we'll open it up after I've done my bit, and we'll discuss it. So just by way of an initial kind of admin, do put your mics on mute so everybody else can kind of enjoy the audio. Do feel free to ask plenty of questions. We'll ask questions at the end of the presentation or the webinar, and a reminder that this is recorded. We'll put this up for others to see, or if you have to dive out, obviously you can watch the full recording at your leisure. By way of kind of MESHWORK, you guys have come through MESHWORK, but it's a reminder that this platform continues to grow apace. We're well into, we're pushing on to kind of towards 900 members now. Typically we're picking up 4 or 5 members a day for the platform, and it is gathering speed. We've got lots planned for the platform, but just a reminder, this is all about collaboration, knowledge sharing, sustainability, and engagement. This platform is more as you guys engage, and certainly the engagement has picked up over the last few months, particularly. So Kat particularly will be reaching out for content partners, and we're talking to a few more commercial partners as well to kind of get things fired up and get as many active members on the platform as possible. So tell all your friends. We'll keep doing the CPDs on here on a kind of a rolling kind of weekly basis, sometimes a couple of weeks as this week, and we'll get going, and we'll increase the discussion, increase the knowledge sharing. And just a quick bit on Mesh Energy. We are an independent provider of net zero carbon building performance and engineering services. We're looking to accelerate the pace of change beyond some of the beyond some of the regulation changes that I'll talk to you about in a minute. And really, we are here to be a kind of an independent sounding board. We've got a huge arsenal of analytical tools and experience behind us, and an ever-growing team that can do projects across the UK and across the globe increasingly as well. But we're fundamentally here to make sustainable design more successful, and helping you guys to learn more about your projects and work with great collaborative teams and share what we know. So that's what we're about. Enough said. There's plenty on the website and YouTube channel, etc., but that's a really quick intro to what we're about. So what we'll cover today, we are going to have a look at some of the energy efficiency standards and regulation, which we know to be changing and that may change. We'll be looking at technology advances, particularly around kind of the heat pumps and solar PV and battery storage, which is fast advancing. We'll look at more kind of general low carbon intelligent building design. We'll also have a look at some of the green incentive schemes which are changing this year. we'll be looking at learning, improving and reporting sustainable design, some of the trends that we see there. And then finally looking at client appetite. I put client appetite in last year's presentation actually. And it's fascinating, as we'll go on to see, you know, that just the sheer demand for sustainable design, and there's a big market appetite for that. So we'll go into a few bits around kind of client appetite and what we're seeing. So a few things to cover there. Let's start with energy efficiency standards. So we've got the building regulations, which we know are changing this year. They're changing in June. It was announced in December that the building regs in the UK are coming into effect, and there were consultations over the last kind of couple of years. And this is all working towards the Future Homes Standard, which comes in the middle of the decade in 2025, which will come around very, very quickly. So this is a kind of a stepping stone. And the fundamental changes that they've made here are to Part L, which is around energy efficiency, and Part F, which is around ventilation. They've made a few changes to kind of Part F, nothing particularly kind of groundbreaking there, but the biggest change or the biggest step forward is around Part L. And this looks at 31% carbon reduction based on today's regs. And this will be achieved through a combination of fabric and renewable technology. So we are, so essentially by law, you won't just be able to kind of bolt solar PV panels on things. You won't just be able to put an air source heat pump or a ground source heat pump in stuff. You're going to have to improve the fabric of the building to new nominal U-value levels and do renewable technology to get you to that 31% reduction. The other big change as well, which is coming in, is the new part. There's a new Part O for the building regulations, and this is around overheating. Now, this for many years has caused increasing headaches, and particularly in London and other built-up areas. This was led by the kind of Greater London Authority, really, and the push by the Mayor of London to increasingly have a look at overheating and avoid the kind of heat islanding effect. But this is now spread to the wider regulations, and we're going to do a whole CPD on the overheating standard and what is included in Part O and has been released. But fundamentally, this is kind of two things that you've got to consider. For domestic buildings, if glazing is below a certain percentage of the kind of total external envelope, you can do a kind of a simplified calculation for it. If it's not, or so if the glazing percentage is above a certain threshold, or it's a building with multiple buildings or flats or homes in it, and absolutely, if you're in the kind of the commercial realm, you're going to have to do this TM59 overheating calculation, and you will do that by essentially modeling the building in IES or some other kind of building physics package, which we kind of do as standard, but this is now, whilst it was optional before, it's now going to be regulation as of June. So again, people trying to push the boundaries domestically with the amount of glazing they're trying to put in or doing commercial work, you're just going to have to do this. It's not mega money, but it's something that you're going to have to do to prove due diligence and making sure that the health of the occupants because of thermal conditions throughout the years is a kind of a key priority and within thresholds. So, our prediction really here, our comments are, building regs changing, that's great. It should have happened a couple of years ago, but it didn't. It's happening now. It is an improvement, and the Future Home Standard in the middle of the decade will see a 70%, 75% reduction on where we are today. So this is a great stepping stone. It gives us a few years to kind of get used to it before moving up to the next level. But you will have seen this a lot in the press if you read around this. It doesn't really go far enough. We're going to see regulations falling well behind what the industry expects buildings to be achieving and what clients want buildings to be achieving, and where the market's going. So looking at both fabric improvements and technology improvements is great, but really, as soon as these regs come out, they're going to be obsolete. People are going to be building in advance of where these regulations are at. So it's great. And particularly with the overheating standard, a big thumbs up for the Part O coming in there. That is definitely something which we see as a big positive step. Whether by lack of education or naivety or just laziness, buildings that should have had overheating work done on them, which didn't have really suffered once they've been built. So that's a great obstacle to have to overcome by law. We see kind of coming in. So kind of great move in the right direction, but certainly overall the changes to the regs, yeah, a bit kind of lukewarm. Really, the market will have moved on. They really should have gone the next step ahead to make them relevant for the next few years. And as I say, we'll do plenty on the way that these regs are changing, how they relate to RIBA 2030. I think we're going to do one of them in February and one on the overheating. So we'll unpack this a lot more, but this is what's happening. In line with the change in regulations, we're going to see a long overdue update of the standard assessment procedure calculation. So SAP, standard assessment procedure, and it's now going to be SAP 10. I think it's 10.1 or 10.2. Can't remember where they've got up to. They keep kind of tweaking it. But they've talked about releasing this over the last few years. And when they release the new building regulations, this new assessment methodology, which you get your EPC from at the back end, is going to change. And there's quite a few changes in here, which is really making SAP calculations more intelligent. They're still a fairly blunt tool, but they are moving on as part of this new release. So a big one here is the changing or reducing electricity carbon factor. Over the last decade, the electricity decarbonisation of the UK's grid has undergone massive change and decarbonised by at least a third, but current SAP calculations don't take that into account. So the new SAP 10 will have a far smaller carbon impact when you're using electricity, which is great for if you're putting heat pumps in, if you're putting other electrical devices in. You won't get penalised anywhere near as much as you do. Or did do. There are new lighting details you can put in. You can now say that you're putting energy storage in and solar diverters into the building, which will have an effect again on energy usage of the building. You can include shower flow rates, whether you're putting in electric showers. So there's a few more details that you can put into the SAP calculations. Wastewater heat recovery will be more prominent. But also, as many of you will have realized if you're familiar with SAP calculations, the thermal bridge values will become a lot more important. What I mean by that is if you just go for the default SAP, pick from a standardized drop-down list and you haven't done separate calculations, you're going to get massively penalized. And as buildings become more efficient, these psi values are even more important. So again, if you're lazy and just kind of go for the defaults within SAP, you could well be hit quite hard relative to what you've seen before. So spending a bit more time on thermal bridge calculations, they're kind of going away from kind of standardized construction detail, but there are various ways that you can do thermal bridge calculations, and we have seen an appetite growing for more detailed calculations, just for kind of pure due diligence, but it will help the overall EPC rating of the building because you've put that much effort in and you've entered correct details into the SAP calcs. So our prediction or kind of comments here are, finally they've reduced an updated SAP. Hopefully it'll get closer or more reliable as an output tool. But generally speaking, this extra level of detail is needed, particularly domestically, and will hopefully really put people who are building sustainable buildings ahead when it comes to the EPC ratings. What I didn't say actually in the previous slide with the changing building regulations is planning policy, generally speaking, is going the way that any new builds have to be EPC A rated or better. And the way that you're going to do that is using this new SAP 10 calculation. And hopefully that will get you a few notches higher because it's going to pick up on those extra sustainable kind of details that you've put into the property. So this is all going in the right direction. It's frustrating how long it's taking, but it's great that SAP will be updated at the same time as the other regs in June of this year. The other thing that I wanted to mention here was various kind of standards and guidance. We saw a great amount of work from LETI and in part the RIBA happening last year. I'm not aware that the RIBA 2030 climate challenge is going to change or evolve this year. I think it's just, it's there now. They've laid out their stand, their stall, they made a slight revision to it. So we've got a few different buckets or building types and targets for embodied carbon and health and well-being. I don't think that's going to change. So use the current kind of climate challenge documentation as kind of read. As far as embodied carbon goes, I think what we will see is a lot more guidance this year on embodied carbon, how to understand it, how to accurately kind of model for it. Software companies like OneClick LCA are pushing hard to try and create tools and build that database of embodied carbon for a vast amount of materials and kind of catch up with the marketplace. I know a lot of manufacturers are pushing to understand and document the embodied carbon that goes into products as well, so that you can put that data into your calculations. But there will be further lobbying to try and move the embodied carbon discussion ahead. Again, any of you who follow LinkedIn or any of the media around this, Part Z is gaining more traction. There was a group last year, including Joe Jack Williams, who's spoken on these webinars. They were all in Parliament, basically speaking to a committee about the importance of getting embodied carbon regulation in and legally binding designers to document their developers to take a consideration of it. And that will make progress. Nothing's going to come into law as far as I can see, but it will make progress. But what we hope is there will be more industry guidance kind of coming out. I say it still is incredible to me, the work that goes in as part of LETI, which is the London Energy Transformation Initiative. When you see the work that over 100 volunteers do, it is seriously impressive. I kind of bow down to the people that can give up that much time and put some serious common sense stuff together to help the wider community make sense of it. So hopefully they'll continue doing that and hopefully have more kind of experienced volunteers join their ranks. But if you're not familiar with LETI, do have a look. Tons of information they're pushing out there, and then essentially they're a non-for-profit organisation, so do support them there. The next thing that I've got on here is around technology advancements. So what are we going to see technology-wise that's going to be impressive or different? Well, I had a chat with Graham Hendra. A few of you may have heard us mention Graham Hendra. He's going to be a content partner for MESHWORK. Knows a huge amount about heat pumps, helps a lot of kind of people out in the heat pump arena. He's going to be giving a talk with David in a few weeks' time, David Reed of Mesh Energy fame. And I actually had a chat with him yesterday to just kind of see if I could fill in any of the blank spots that I wasn't aware of. And a kind of an interesting conversation. There is a lot happening in the market, but there's not a lot happening in the market. And what I mean by that is there's a change in subsidies, which I'll go on to talk about in a moment. But air source heat pumps are becoming, the kind of the talk of the time at the moment. A lot of people are trying to figure out how they don't put in a gas boiler, what the uplift is for putting in air source heat pumps. People kind of understand a lot more about, kind of what they are, what they look like, what they might cost, and how capable they are compared to kind of gas boiler systems. So there's a lot more familiar chat, both professionally and with the clients around this. Incrementally, there will be better coefficients of performance for these devices. We're not going to see some kind of like radical doubling or tripling of coefficients of performance, but something that came into the media recently, which isn't necessarily kind of a new thing, but there was a Dutch company who announced that they were bringing out a high temperature heat pump. And for those of you who aren't familiar with what that means, essentially it is if you had an oil or a gas boiler in an existing property that's producing, 70 odd degrees, 75 degrees hot water temperature, you could take that unit out and put a heat pump in, an air source heat pump in which meant that you wouldn't have to change the rest of the infrastructure within the building. So it's a kind of a like-for-like pitching at the retrofit market, easy to install, gives you the high flow temperatures. Yes, it uses more electricity, but there will be a few other products coming to market. Dakin have done a high temperature system for a long time. And when I spoke with Graham yesterday, there was talk of maybe Samsung, but there's a lot of chatter and no kind of real kind of hard evidence. So some of these bigger brands will likely be bringing out maybe towards the end of the year, some more kind of retrofit high temperature options. One of the other exciting things which is being talked about within the sector this year is, we'll all have heard of Octopus Energy, a very, very big player, and one that's still around, probably because it's been propped up with government money over the last 6 months. One of the energy providers that is still around and supplying energy to the UK. Octopus Energy, a massive organisation now, and they have come to market and suggested that they will, if people sign up with them, that they will effectively put in heat pumps, not for free, but a very, very, very low cost, like a market changing amount of money. So rather than £10,000 or £8,000 for an air source heat pump install, it may be £1,000, £2,000, £3,000 for a heat pump install. And so we're thinking here, you know, they're going for economies of scale here. If they can buy in bulk, if they can sign you up for maybe a 5-year term, then they've worked out the numbers stack up, so you can get a free heat pump, but you're locked in with that provider for a number of years. So if you visit the Octopus Energy website, you'll see you can kind of sign up, and they start luring you in for that. So it'd be interesting to see how that goes. And I know HomeServe, which is a very big kind of maintenance company within the UK, they're possibly doing something similar as well. So keep your eye out for that. But you'll see some of those bigger companies leaning into that opportunity this year. But the increase in popularity of air source heat pumps this year, we've seen it towards the end of last year with ground source heat pumps and air source heat pumps. As with all the thing, all of these heat pump technologies, demand is outstripping supply, and I don't think that's going to change. If anything, it will get worse. So we know there's a big skill shortage within the UK, and a lot of big companies are trying to upskill their installation teams and get their head around what's happening with the air source heat pump and ground source heat pump market. But there will be shortages. Lead times will be long, and it will be quite a tumultuous year for getting hold of some of this kit. And as more and more people put in air source heat pumps, funnily enough, there will be more people trying to make a quick buck. So there'll be more kind of air source heat pump cowboys who will be cold calling you. They'll be trying to pitch you, you know, an air source heat pump that will change your life and half your energy bills for a mere few £1,000s. So make sure you're aware of that, and make sure your clients are aware of that as well. So and plenty of due diligence is needed in this fast changing market here. Ground source heat pump wise, I don't think we're going to see any kind of fundamental changes, but marginal increases in coefficients of performance. But the main advances that we can see this year around the kind of the air source heat pumps, the way they're sold, maybe some of the prices, and some of the systems which could be used in the retrofit market. Solar PV and battery. This is kind of an interesting one. I did a lot of digging around here. Again, I'm not sure at the moment solar PV is going to change anybody else's lives, you know, next or this year. Again, I think there will be marginal advances. They are talking about a new type of solar cell, which they're getting about another 30% efficiency from coming through, which is seeing great success in the labs, but that's not going to hit the market this year. Maybe it might be in the middle of a decade, something might happen. So again, there'll be marginal increases in efficiency. But what we probably will see more of this year is more battery products being released. SolarEdge at the end of last year, SolarEdge have done fantastic things in solar panel monitoring, and they just released their energy bank at the end of last year. SolarEdge particularly, just for getting that the kind of the software and the applications that they use for their products, they came out with an 11 kilowatt battery system. A Tesla system's about 13, 14 kilowatts. So this is a slightly smaller product, but if the work that they've done in the solar market is anything to go by, I would watch out for their battery product. And obviously there's going to be a lot more competition, a lot more battery products released. And these battery products will have apps which will allow you to link them to your electric vehicles, your electricity supply for the home, to tailor them, to tweak them, to help really maximize their storage and also provide power cut protection. So these systems are a lot more intelligently connected to others and have bigger brains. So do watch out for other battery releases in the market. Costs may increase slightly, mainly due to inflation, we think. But it may be, hopefully, it's a quick bobble before, again, market kind of competition comes in and increases and prices start kind of coming down. There's also a big scramble to figure out, how, alternatives to lithium-ion technology as well, but it's unlikely that that will make a change this year. But no known big breakthroughs, and there's always that kind of due diligence as to whether battery is right or wrong for a particular application, or whether it's worth future-proofing for a battery, even if a battery is not first put in, should always be kind of forefront of your mind. So again, our prediction, nothing massively changing solar panel wise. But solar battery tech will continue to bleed out into the market, and some of the apps should be quite impressive as well. So low carbon and intelligent building design. This is a more kind of higher level here. Think here. We've talked about embodied carbon already. The GLA will continue to consult, and as I say, with this Part Z lobbying that's going on by the wider community, Greater London Authority always leads the way on this kind of stuff, and so it'd be interesting to see how this develops. I haven't heard anything on the grapevine about particularly what is coming out this year, but their focus does seem to be on whole life carbon at the moment. They're very, very focused on that. They've nailed a lot of the overheating and set some very, very strong targets for 30% better than current regs, and obviously when those regs change, that's going to be 61% reduction that buildings are going to have to achieve in London as a minimum. But embodied carbon is where they're going to be focusing their energy this year, and who knows what they'll come out with. As I say, there's a big push to kind of further understand it and report it, which I'll touch on in a minute. Just kind of more generally circular economy wise, again, there will be, and we have seen more and more manufacturers actually documenting and stating on data sheets what the whole life carbon is of that particular product. So if you are more interested in looking at whole life carbon for developments, putting into calculators, you've actually got some hard and fast figures there, which should be third-party verified. There'll be more EPDs on the market and more products to choose from, more data that we can share, which hopefully make your embodied carbon reporting that much more accurate. So I say there will be, we thought that the GLA would mandate whole life carbon as part of the land and plan by the end of last year. That there's considerably more chance that will be the case by the end of this year, probably 90-95% probability if I had a gun to my head. As far as building analysis tools is concerned, we saw a fantastic advancement in the way in which people were using, certainly more educated architects were using building tools and talking to their clients about using those for the wider benefit of projects. And we are convinced, in fact, we've got more people joining the business that are trained in that and training up in that. That is only going one way. It's not going to reverse. So buildings continue to be complex beasts. The hurdles, the sustainability hurdles and embodied carbon, operational energy and water usage are again, elements of building design that aren't going to go away. And we need software, and there will be more pressure this year using software to help unpick that at a very early stage, benchmarking designs, hopefully light touch, so it's not too heavy on the wallet, but quite quickly then moving on with that centralized building design and creating far more group discussion when it comes to, right, okay, wow, we're there already, or we've got a way to go. This is how we revise the design, or let's come up with some new ideas to really make sure we can kind of tick all the boxes and reduce risk on projects. The other trend as well, again, that we've seen is, as we've done more mechanical and electrical design work as a business, there have been greater and greater requests for what we call blended sustainability and MEP. So rather than having a traditional M&E consultancy on a practice or a project, as well as a sustainability consultant, the ability to try and find partners that can have a foot in both of those camps and really bring some gravitas to both of those discussions is not only saves a huge amount of money for projects, but just allows more flowing conversations as you move through the kind of the RIBA stages, and again come up with or identify issues as early as possible. So we will see more intelligent MEP design talking about sustainability, and hopefully more sustainability consultants raising MEP issues at an early stage. So that's a trend again that we'll see increasing into this year. More generally, just because of the way that the RIBA framework's set out and holistic building design is being talked about now, centralized modeling is the only way in which you can look at daylighting, overheating, ventilation, embodied carbon all in one place. I mean, that is the most cost-effective way of doing it. So as some practices draw a line in the sand and say, right, we're only going to be designing buildings to these progressive standards or net zero carbon, there is no other kind of practical way that you can do that other than using centralized modeling, using some kind of widely available, albeit professional, software. So I think more and more people will be jumping on that bandwagon and hopefully educating themselves as to the sums of money that it takes to do that, but also understanding that it's not a huge amount of money and the client can easily bear it, given the benefits that can bring to a project. Net zero carbon design, I had a slide on this last year. Over the last few months, net zero carbon design, the volume has really been cranked up quite significantly with this, and discussions have really made me look up and the business take this kind of more seriously than we were previously. We were focused a lot on the kind of the RIBA targets, but the appetite for net zero and understanding what it takes to get there, at the very least, those frequency of conversations has definitely improved markedly over the last quarter. So the biggest issue we see in the market still is understanding what net zero design actually means. There are still multiple definitions of net zero swirling around in the marketplace, but understanding whether you're going to hit all of the definitions, one of the definitions, and the logical process or progress that you make through a design in order to kind of get there most cost effectively. Again, we will see more practices embracing, and this is very much about kind of collaborative design going into next year. And again, got a couple of slides on that, but we've seen the most successful practices and teams that we've been a part of have all been ready to share, ready to do research, as they share what they know and tackle problems together, rather than going for a very kind of super duper kind of specialist in one particular area and taking their knowledge as kind of golden and not really kind of questioning it. So collaboration around net zero carbon design, further understanding, further reading, further guidance. We're not aware of any kind of regulations kind of coming in place to make it more clear about exactly what is net zero carbon design and what isn't. I'm not sure the definitions are really gonna change, but there won't be, as far as I'm aware, any kind of frameworks or any meaningful particular definition. We might see that towards the kind of the middle of the decade or over the next kind of couple of years, but certainly not this year. There's enough for people to scramble around in changing regulations and the climate challenge. So net zero carbon design will be better understood, and increasingly, and this is important, I think personally, again, when we look at the top practices, what they're doing, whether they're big or small, practices that are really trying to make progress here and move the needle, net zero carbon design options, and having a serious discussion with the client up front, even if it doesn't happen, but just discussing it will be more widespread through this year, because it helps the client understand, it helps the architects understand that movement as well. I think a lot of people are being surprised at how little extra you have to do if your design process is robust. And if you can get to RIBA 2030, you can get to net zero carbon design based on the current definitions without too much trouble at all. So green incentive schemes. Green incentive schemes. So domestic RHI, which is the domestic renewable heat incentive, is coming to an end in March of this year. The scheme's been running for what, 7 years, 8 years maybe. Actually quite successful. You know, a lot of people have got free, tax-free government money from the domestic scheme and also the commercial scheme, which ended last year. So unless you've got an extension, an allowable extension, the domestic RHI scheme comes to an end. The good news is, as we predicted, the scheme will continue. It'll have a different name. And rather than getting paid out over 7 years, you're actually going to get an upfront grant. So previously, you might get a bigger sum of money, say £10,000 domestically, but it would get paid out over 7 years and you would have to foot the bill. With the clean heat scheme, or the boiler replacement scheme as it's known, when that comes into effect in April, for air source heat pumps, you'll get a £5,000 upfront grant, which your MCS accredited installer will have to claim, and you'll get your price knocked down. If you're putting in the ground source heat pump, there'll be a £6,000 grant for that as well. I say it's a grant, not a subsidy, so it's upfront savings rather than it changes the financial kind of dynamics of the transaction. Importantly, it's only for existing buildings, not for new buildings, and it's for replacing oil and gas boilers only, as far as we're aware. LPG boilers probably will be scooped up in that as well, but it's only for existing buildings, not for new buildings, whereas the current domestic RHI scheme scoops up new and existing. So that is really, really critical. New buildings now should have this stuff been put in, and they should be efficient enough so the units are small and don't cost exorbitant amounts of money. There will be very, very strong uptake for this scheme. I think, I can't remember how many grants they've made available, whether it's 40,000 or something like 30 or 40,000. Seems like a big number, but there will be a big scrabble for this free kind of government money, and as I say, may cause issues with supply and lead times and stuff for getting this kit installed. But there will be a big uptake for the scheme. There always is a big uptake for a scheme where the government's handing out money, particularly grants, and I don't think this is going to be any different. So kind of learning, improving and reporting in sustainable design. Again, we kind of shared this year, really. Collaboration will continue into 2022. There are less people kind of coming out of their silos, and I hope that collaboration, in part helped by the MESHWORK platform that we've got, increases. So design teams hopefully will get more more prepared to work with one another, share information. And that will be more commonplace. As we know, and if you've been on any of these webinars before, success in sustainable design is all about sharing information. If you keep the information you know to yourself, and everybody else does that on the team, you are guaranteed to take a big swing and probably take a big miss on what you think is going to be or should be a sustainable project. They are very strongly linked. So I think just generally people know that we need to move on. Collaboration is more important, and we'll see more of that to solve greater and greater sustainability challenges going forward. Post-occupancy evaluation, again, we touched on this last year. It's still very much a key RIBA stage. The Building Performance Network has done some great work through 2021. If you haven't or aren't aware of the Building Performance Network, do get on and check them out. They're doing some great stuff. It's got some case studies on there, loads of knowledgeable people that have been doing post-occupancy evaluation for a long time. sterling price prerequisite, that's still the case. I'm not aware of any other awards that are requiring post-occupancy evaluation, but over the last few days, having done work on various RIBA entries for architects, the kind of the actual energy usage of the building is being asked for, both regulated and unregulated. So if you're doing post-occupancy evaluation from the very start and doing some basic energy monitoring, it becomes far, far easier to fill out those applications. And I wish for those projects we'd had a bit more information. It would have made my life considerably easier. So again, clarity on what post-occupancy evaluation actually means. More architects I've spoke to are keen to involve this from the early stages. I think more people will get that and understand that's a fundamental part of modern day responsible design, understanding what happens after you hand the keys over. I've added this sustainable design reporting in. Over last year, obviously RIBA, the climate challenge changed, and work with LETI and the RIBA made it much, much more clear how you can report in embodied carbon and some of these other metrics of sustainable buildings. It may seem like another thing to do. You know, a lot of designers have got a lot to do anyway, and it may seem like a right hassle to do it. But I can promise you that if you do this in line with maybe some more kind of centralized modeling of the buildings that you're doing, using the right kind of software, what is actually a very, very small change. Once you've built a building in 3D, and the amount of information that's out there about embodied carbon and some of these free tools that ourselves and others have got out there, you can very, very quickly understand a lot of detail about the embodied carbon and sustainability metrics, operational energy usage, and all these kind of things. Just as a simple output, you've done all the hard work in designing the building anyway, and this is just an output which you should be using for benchmarking anyway. But reporting more generally is key for peer review. These elements should mean more to the design team. It makes it easier now that we've got a framework to review against where it was at, other projects that you've done, other projects that other practices have shared. And again, there's a big push for sharing projects between practices and how they stack up for an embodied carbon and operational energy point of view. And increasingly it is becoming a requirement for building design awards. Every RIBA award now that you go in for asks you for the operational energy breakdown as well as the embodied carbon breakdown per square meter. And all that documentation's out there to read, and we've built that into our Excel calculator, so it automatically documents it once you put in some known things about the buildings. So there'll be far more frequent requests for sharing building performance information, and increasingly between more educated clients as well. So we've got awards asking for information, we've got clients asking for information, and within your teams as well, as you progress, and you might want to compare against how your peers are doing or how your other buildings are doing, there may be internal and external pressure for better reporting. I say if you can make small changes to your design process in 2022, you'll see big gains with the insight that you get into those projects. So finally, client appetite. Well, this is just the one of the last slides that I've got here. And last year, more than any year that I've known before, having been in the sector for the last 15, is clients are far more educated. There's far more information that they can read, and they're coming to the table with a lot more what ifs. You know, we've had a lot more clients coming to us, and it's right, we're designing this group of houses or this particular sports center, whatever, to net zero carbon or RIBA 2030. There's no two ways about it. How do we do this? What work do we need to do? We're not going to accept anything less. And how does this feed into the wider cost plan? So a lot more clients pushing design teams to advance their thinking, I say, well in front of any building regulations, and certainly in the domestic market. And a lot more clients now just aren't the slightest bit interested in putting in gas boilers and will be prepared to pay a bit more money for an air source heat pump. They just get that it's worth spending more money on building fabric. And commercial clients, again, they're starting to see the value of sustainable buildings in their estates, both from a marketing point of view, but also from a kind of a rental premium or an asset uplift that they can get from sustainability. We had a discussion with a developer only a few weeks ago, actually, and they were, in this particular case, they were having a bit of issue with the local planning authority. And the planning consultant said, look, really, you know, if you want to develop on here, you've got to move the needle. Now, the planners hadn't told them what they needed to do as far as energy efficiency is concerned, but they were seriously considering a net zero carbon development to give them the best chance of even being able to develop on the site. So for the sake of a bit of analysis and possibly a small uplift in the actual construction cost, for commercially, for a developer, that could mean a significant amount of money just because you can get through the door, just getting planning permission, as well as for a whole load of other reasons. So really, really interesting kind of dynamics from clients. And also institutional investors, the way that money is flowing down, particularly for debt developers, from institutional investors is changing. So they may get preferential borrowing rates. They may just not get money at all if they don't develop sustainable development. So client appetite is changing, both domestically and commercially. And again, you will see that accelerate further. And as people realize what is needed to be done and the relatively low impact on construction cost in order to get to those levels, it's a snowball effect, and people change what they're asking for because there's lots of upsides and very, very, very few downsides. So guys, I'm going to wrap it up there. What I want to do is invite you to ask any questions or share any trends that you think will come in this year. I've mentioned a fair few there and shared, I think what I know. Invariably, some of that stuff will come off and some won't. And it'd be great to know what you guys are thinking as well. So let me give you a couple of minutes to do that. What I will do, just whilst you're thinking, is tell you about webinar in a couple of days' time. We have got, I think it's George, isn't it, Kat, from Spirit Energy, that's talking about battery technology. So if there's anybody worth asking, the guys from Spirit Energy know their stuff, and they're talking about the way that battery technology is advancing, as well as just an overall introduction to battery systems as well. So if you're particularly interested in the way solar is going to go, do check out that webinar in a couple of days' time. Anyone got any questions? There is a lot to take on board there. Obviously, you guys have different guys and clients that you're working with, but yeah, feel free to ask whatever you fancy. So Glyn, cheers Glyn, good to see you again on the webinar. So Glyn said, not having looked at the new regs myself, how much closer to passive house are we, and do you see it becoming great desired level by clients? Interesting, Glenn. So passive house, so my take on passive house is great brand, and focuses essentially exclusively on operational energy. The new regs, operational energy, essentially by reducing carbon by 31%, it's pretty similar to reducing operational energy of a building by the same kind of percentage. You tend to find that when you reduce carbon through fabric and heating systems, you're looking at reducing the operational energy by that much. So passive house, it will be getting closer to passive house. Passive house levels of operational energy and carbon reduction are more aligned to the Future Home Standard, which will come in a few years' time. So around that kind of 70% mark. So it's a bit closer, but it's not even halfway close to getting to passive house. So it's getting there. Passive house still trumps it. for operational energy. But as I've said many times before, whilst passive house is well known, and actually when you look at the passive house data, there are less passive houses being built. And the reason is, or certainly certified, is because I think a lot more people are trying to save a bit of cost and not necessarily get them registered. But a lot of the advancements in wider holistic design are being taken into consideration. So it's not just about saving operational energy. People are starting to look at embodied carbon and water usage as well to deliver a more holistic design building. So that's a long way of saying it's getting to passive house, but passive house is more in line with the future home standard that's coming in a few years' time, Glyn. Tony, we already do M&E consultancy to answer your question. So do tap us up if you want M&E design for any of your projects. Darren said, when do the new regs come into force? What's the rest of it? When do they come into force? Can they be applied to current on-site projects? So they come properly into force on the 22nd of June, I believe, this year. Can they be applied to current on-site projects? No, because they will have come under the 2013 regs. So what we're saying is, even a project that has gone in for planning today, as long as it's granted permission, I believe, before the middle of the year, you'll still just be held to 2013 regs. Once you start getting permissions in July, August, the rest of this year, then they'll have to meet the new regs as they've come in. Stephanie's asking about regenerative design, living building challenge. I'm also interested in the Neighbours UK scheme and whether this will feature this year. Another question follows on from passive house question. Do you think this will feature on commercial work more? Final question. Do you think natural materials will come more to the fore with people talking about nature-based solutions? So, okay, let me try and answer a few of those then. So I think regenerative design, I don't think we're necessarily going to see anything on the ground. I think I've heard more and more talk about it, Stephanie. And again, a lot of these things have to be explained first and get people on board, but before they kind of turn into anything kind of particularly meaningful. And I think it's a long way off getting that critical mass about regenerative design, but I have heard it talked about more frequently. But I think people have to join the dots. Embodied carbon is helping that discussion. So regenerative design certainly will hopefully have a kind of a shorter runway as more people understand the way that embodied carbon and materials, and your point there about natural materials. The way in which those reduce carbon, with less processing in them. Natural materials, definitely. There will be more materials on the market which are more naturally based, hopefully have less formaldehyde in them, less kind of VOCs and stuff, which, kind of outgas from those materials. So yeah, I think that conversation is moving on. I'm not sure we're necessarily going to see any regulation, or there may be some more guidance, but that's really as far as I would go. I wouldn't hang my hat on anything massively happening in that regard. As far as Neighbours UK, I'm not actually familiar with that scheme. Hands up, I'm not familiar with the Neighbours UK scheme. So if anybody else on the call is happy to write a bit about Neighbours or contact Stephanie directly, that would be great. Or answer on MESHWORK about what Neighbours UK is, that would be awesome too. Passive house commercially, that's a good one. I don't think so. I think there's enough commercial, the kind of the BREEAM commercial framework, I think, is kind of here to stay for a fair while. I don't think passive house will feature particularly, if at all, commercially. I think it will just stay in the domestic realm, to my knowledge. What we will try and do, and as I say, in February, hopefully we'll try and lift a lid a bit more on this, is how the new regs stack up against passive house and net zero carbon, so you can kind of see where they're moving. It's actually quite complicated because a lot of these schemes focus on completely different things, and so sometimes it can be a bit messy to kind of compare them. But I don't think commercially passive house is going to make any inroads this year at all. Okay, folks, I don't think there's any more questions at the moment. Let's leave it there. I'll let you get on with your day, but thanks for joining us very much indeed. Do join the webinar on Friday with Spirit Energy and Introduction to Battery Storage Systems. You can sign up for that one. Kat's going to be putting loads more webinars and stuff on MESHWORK, and do pop in every day or every few days and do interact with the stuff up there, and do share your questions and share what you're finding, reading, learning about as well. Look forward to seeing you guys soon. Take care. Enjoy your day. Bye-bye.